don't know me, I'm Brian Abraham, the Governor's Chief of Staff. I have Dr. Persley, Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services. I'll never quit calling it DHHR. Superintendent Blatt and Major Mitchell with the West Virginia State Police. So the purpose of this press conference today is to address the issue that's been batted back and forth in the press, and that is the disparity between DHHR's information and what the state police have as to what happened in those years past. The governor's office conducted an investigation, and in that it was an investigation of, well before this most recent announcement of having this press conference, we had asked both agencies to gather up whatever information they believed to be pertinent to this event and be prepared to disclose it to the governor's office. We have not prepared a formal written report to this. We're here today to discuss it and provide answers to your questions. The state police have gathered that information. Some of it's already out in the media in the form of, I believe, the 911 traffic or the dispatch traffic, the GPS coordinates are out there. CPS is much more limited in what it's been able to talk about because of both federal and state law. There is a little bit of a disparity in that. We saw information where you had an individual indicating they represent an organization that's going to file a lawsuit on behalf of some group stating that we had violated the law. We've had lawyers look at that. That letter both misstates federal and state law, and it is not factually accurate. We think DHHR has acted within the bounds of what it can disclose. From a political perspective in the governor's office, we would wish that we could be more forthcoming, because I think as you get to the bottom of this and hear more information, a lot of your concerns would be dissuaded. We met with some of the legislative leadership early last week or late before, and we disclosed some of this information, again, on a limited basis, and I think we satisfied them that the actions taken would not have impacted little Kennedy's passing. And that's the most important thing here also to remember. This is an event that occurred in Boone County back in April. There's a criminal case that is pending against several individuals there. Some of you, I think, are aware there was a hearing held in Boone County yesterday where one of the defense attorneys was trying to limit our ability to have this press conference today. It's never been the intent of the governor's office or any of the agencies to be involved in that criminal investigation. We are not a party to that criminal proceeding. It's the Boone County Sheriff's Department was the investigating agency. The Boone County Prosecuting Attorney's Office is responsible for all criminal proceedings going forward. We have no involvement in that, no control over it whatsoever. So we are mindful of our ability by this to impede that prosecution. So we have taken every effort that we can, and that sometimes to your consternation has been to try not to produce any more information than we have to, because those people have a right to a fair trial. There are rules against us reporting that out, again, federal and state law. So that's where we find ourselves today. We will not be discussing anything about the criminal case. We never intended to, but we know that that's not our place to do that. That's for And you all as reporters know that when you go and talk to the prosecutors or to the police when there's a pending criminal case, they're more limited in what they can say, and we're not going to jump over that. So I hope you'll respect that when you get to your questions. That being said, as we gathered the information, the governor asked us to take a look at, again, talking with both representatives, or all representatives from the agencies, what, if anything, happened that could have prevented this situation? What, if anything, happened that caused this situation? And are there things that we could have done or can do differently to prevent something occurring like this in the future? So in answering all those questions, that's why we're appearing before you here today. I have personally interviewed the former state trooper who is detailed in the information that's been put out, one of the two. Our office has interviewed the second one. I interviewed both of the CPS workers personally myself. To give you the bottom line of, and we've obviously reviewed all the documentary evidence that I've disclosed. So to give you the bottom line as I can best articulate it and have provided it to the governor, I think and believe as follows. that in 2023, when the West Virginia State Police made contact with this girl at her residence, it's the representation of both troopers that she was in good health, she was unharmed, that she was not in any way malnourished, nor did she display any angst about any abuse or neglect. And it was their belief at the time, both conversing with her and her family in the residence, that no abuse and neglect occurred, and they did not intend to make a report or referral of that to DOHS. I believe the evidence establishes through both GPS and the testimony of those two troopers to me that they did in fact go to Department of Human Services. I'm going to say it again wrong all day long. I'm still getting used to it. That they went there. There was informal contact with the caseworkers, that they relayed the information to those caseworkers, not intending to make any sort of formal referral of any accusation of abuse or neglect. In actuality, they indicate that the girl made an indication to him, the trooper, that she was fearful of COVID and that she did not want to be around people because she was fearful of COVID. The officer believed that that was odd for a person of that age to have such a belief, and he wanted to go to the department and at least make them aware of it and see if somebody maybe would call her and talk to her about it. There again, there was no referral made. They did not seek to fill out any paperwork, and DOHS did not take it as a formal referral because there were no allegations of abuse or neglect. So nothing else was done beyond that on that day. Now, we've had information that we've provided out as the governor's office that perhaps the officers did not go there that day. And you're going to say, well, why is that? That's because the two people I've interviewed, the workers, say they have no recollection of the officers being there in the office that day. They are sure they didn't make a referral. They don't believe it was common for an officer or officers to come in person to the department. Now, in fairness, I think in talking with state police, they believe it's more common than that was made aware to us, that there is interaction routinely between agencies and DOHS. Notwithstanding, the department provided some corroborating evidence, if you will, to the assertion that the officer may have not been in the building and made a referral. And that is, there's a login system at the front desk, and it's supposed to have 100% usage, and that is anybody that enters the office is supposed to sign in. The reason that occurs is, and I hope I'm not stealing anybody's time or thunder, is because that office building contains information regarding child support, which the IRS considers confidential information, and that's why that's supposed to have 100% accountability of who's in the building. That system is audited in the form of, if you want to call it a secret boss, that from time to time the department has to send somebody who sits in the lobby and watches to see if the department is following its own rule and allowing people in without being signed in. Just not too long prior to this incident, after, there was 100% accountability on one of the visits they made. So that's the first layer that the department offered up to establish that maybe the officers didn't arrive there that day. Secondly, there's an internal chat system at the department where if somebody comes to visit, the person at the front desk types upstairs and says, so-and-so's here to see you, and someone comes down, meets them, and takes them to the relevant office. There was no record of the officers' names in either the chat search or in the search of the database regarding the sign-in. So there was corroborating evidence that the DHHR offered to us early on that the officer did not go to the DOHS office. Obviously, the GPS, as I mentioned, had them placed in the parking lot. So not until I did those personal interviews and had a chance to look them in the eye and kind of judge them for myself as to who may be right or who may be wrong, we were putting out information as it was being given to us in real time. Why did we do that? That's, quite frankly, to answer questions that were coming in, during press conferences on a daily basis. Some of you traveled to places where the governor was having unrelated, press events, opening parks, putting fish in ponds, etc., and asked questions about the details of this case, of which he couldn't know on a daily basis. But again, putting out information as we got it in an effort to, Jim Justice always wants to be extremely transparent. I could tell you in the military, you always are leery of the first information as it comes in off the battlefield because it's often incomplete or inaccurate. And when you relay that, you can often put out bad information. So it's always better to be patient. We have a saying, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And that's why we had hoped that people would be patient, allow us to do this review, and then relay the information. We, however, understand that you have a viewership, you have a need to feed their interest, and you want to have information as quickly as you can. But that's how things get reported out that aren't always 100% accurate, and that is not giving us the proper time to do the review. So what's the end result? Based upon that, the troopers relayed to me with corroborating evidence with 100% certainty that they were present that day at the office and made an informal communication with the department, again, not making any indication of abuse or neglect, but one of the little girl had a fear of COVID, and that they state that with 100% certainty. The caseworkers, on the other hand, say that they have no recollection of them being there, that it's not usual for them to be there, but when asked specifically, can you state with certainty they were not there, their answer is no. So based upon that, if I were sitting and trying to weigh this with a scale, I would tip to it's our belief the state police went there and made this informal disclosure. That disclosure, again, was not a referral for abuse and neglect, would never have resulted in an investigation, and would have, my belief, not affected what happened this year with that little girl, particularly given that the officer observed her and she exhibited no signs of maltreatment. Keep in mind, again, and being fairly blunt, I was speaking with some of my family who'd watched some of the news articles. They were under the impression that the trooper had gone to the home just a day or two before the little girl's death. And why didn't you all catch it? This was over a year before she was discovered that this incident occurred. Now, there was an earlier incident, and actually two, that involved what has been referred to in the media as prior referrals. I'll allow them to go into the detail of why they can't make those disclosures, but that information was leaked out, we're certain, from someone with access to it on a confidential system within the department, and that information was put out in a very incomplete way, and rather than the media saying, we have questions about what this is and what it means, the accusations were immediately, there's been a cover-up, and DOHS has lied about prior referrals, and we have evidence of prior referrals. Again, I'll allow Secretary Pursley to go into detail, but on the first instance, she was months old, if a year old. The allegation had nothing to do with her whatsoever. It had to do with older children who were unrelated directly to her. They were half brothers and sisters, I believe. But it was unrelated to her. It was unfounded, and the case was closed. The later event had nothing directly to do with her, was an allegation made regarding one of the adults in the home. Again, unfounded, and the case was closed. Neither of those, let me repeat and reiterate, none of those two prior instances contained any information that she had been subject to any abuse or neglect that should have caused the department to take action and do any proceedings that would have removed her from that environment. I have, in my investigation, come to the belief that that second instance, this is my personal opinion, and it's based upon my 20 years prior to coming to Charleston of working in this area as a prosecutor and a defense attorney, that there's a little bit of a nuance in that second one, and that one of the allegations made against the adult, although it was unfounded, had it been found to be substantiated and followed up on, could have tangentially involved the child and would have resulted in at least her being involved in the case. So the question has been, why is her name on these case files and case numbers if there's no referral made in her name? And that is Secretary, and I'm going to allow them to go in much more detail. Anytime the department goes into a home and there is a minor child residing in that home, their name is included on that case number, and it basically resides there forever. So to get a piece of paper and says, aha, here's 2 case numbers with her name on it, that ultimately led to the conclusion by many that there were prior referrals, is simply not accurate, and it's not according to the law. So again, to reiterate today, our findings is we believe that the state police went to the home in 2023, finding no abuse or neglect. The trooper still made a trip to the department, made a informal disclosure about her fear, and then left. There was no action taken by DHHR on that because it did not make any allegation of abuse or neglect, which they act on. And that's all the involvement the state has. Again, everything that's current is Boone County. We've taken no action in it. There is one instance I'm going to address because it came up yesterday at the hearing that we weren't a party to, but came up. And that is apparently a department worker went to the jail and attempted to interview the mother in an effort to close out the file, if you will, the investigatory file. It's been alleged in the court pleadings that that worker concealed their identity and made reference to themselves as a lawyer. That is inaccurate, not just inaccurate, but blatantly false. The worker's ID was taken at the jail and Xeroxed, establishing who they were. They, of course, gave their credentials and disclosed who they were. The mother came, and when it was disclosed who they were, did not make any statement, and none was taken. Now, I can't find the words to explain how incredibly, in my mind, stupid it was for that worker to go to that facility and try to interview that person, given what we're doing here today, and given the fact that they had been in the governor's office as recently as last Friday being interviewed about this. Someone should have put their hand up and asked higher up within the department, do you think this is a good idea to go do this? That was not done. That was handled at this worker level and at the county office level. We think there may have at least been contact with what would be the child welfare coordinator, who again is at the county level, that authorized the trip to the jail and thought it was a good idea. Had somebody called, I'm sure someone in the secretary's office or in the legal office or at the commissioner's office, that would have been recommended not to do that. That notwithstanding, as we transition into the things, what we've learned and what we're going to learn from and do better, when I think our heads exploded here about why this happened, and we reached out to the department and said, why did you do this? They looked at their policy, and the policy did not have a limitation in writing as to when you should or shouldn't go take a statement from a criminal defendant. So they have now, as of last night, working into the wee hours, now amended their policy that would not be a reoccurrence. And there's a little bit of a conflict in the law that caused them to believe what they were doing was right, and I can understand that. But again, my point was, why didn't you raise your hand and let's talk about this before you go do it? But that is, under our court rules, abuse and neglect cases have priority over all other cases, criminal cases, civil cases. So they typically are of the mindset, we've got to get our work done first because we're going to be first up to bat. That's the easiest way I can say it. In this instance, there was no DOHS case because there were no other infants in the home, so there was nothing that would be pending. This is going to be a criminal case going forward. So what they would have merely been doing was closing out a file. So in that instance, we've now, I think, made the distinction in policy that in the event there's a criminal case filed, then the proper procedure would be reach out to the prosecuting attorney in the county and the courts and resolve any conflicts as to whether any investigation should be made on the department side versus the criminal side before proceeding. So that's one of the catches, unfortunately, as a result of an error, I think, that we've made and we fixed. There are multiple other things that we've done as a result of this instance that we've taken into consideration. We've made decisions, and we've already acted upon. The first of which, although I have made the finding and relayed to the governor that I believe the officer went to the department and made an informal conversation with the workers, the true proper procedure would have been, had they wanted to make a referral, would have been called the 800 number and make it through the law enforcement prompt rather than go and make in-person contact. As of last week, the West Virginia State Police has issued a memorandum to all detachments, to all troopers, that from now on they will reinforce that 800 number is to be the proper way to make a referral so that that is documented. That's not only so that we don't have an instance at the department again where they can't find a record of it, it's for the protection of the officer to say, yes, I did make a referral, and they have a record that's sent to them where they make it. So that's our new policy. It has been trained on for a number of years, but this officer was honestly near retiring age, and I don't think he would have gotten the information because his hotline didn't start till about 2015. His training at the academy predated that by many years, so I can understand he may have not been up to date. It's now all academy training has been receiving it. It's about a 40-hour block course, 140 pages or so of training they get on abuse and neglect, and this referral number is included in that. So I believe we're also going to put it in our refresher training at all academy events and law enforcement training. So again, that's followed. That would have prevented us, quite frankly, from being here today. There would never have been a question as to what happened between these two agencies. And let's face it, there's not, I mean, that's the whole crux of why we're here today, is one side said this and one side said that. At the end of the day, none of that has anything to do with why the little girl passed away and why the parents and grandparents are charged, but we've gotten fixated on one agency messed up or the other one messed up and what's going on. This, we think, will prevent that in the future by having a one-way in, one-way out, which exists now, that if it's followed should make a complete record of these referrals. Something that we discovered as part of looking into this is, and it came about during one of our meetings with the leadership, as I talked about. It appears in around 2019, she went to homeschool status and therefore was removed from the public school system. There is not a mandatory, but a conditional requirement that we are maybe hoping to change going forward, but Superintendent Blatt has investigated this and reported back that from 2019 till in April, the school system did not receive what's called an assessment, and that is every 3 years, I think 5th grade, 8th grade, 11th grade, homeschoolers are required to conduct an assessment and provide that to the school system, making proof of their accomplishment at their homeschooling. She should have done that in the year leading up to this, 8th grade. That was not done, not received by Boone County. And there is, again, I go back to the conditional requirement, and that is in the event there's a failure to do that, the county may reach out and issue what's called a truancy petition, and that is if you don't do the assessment, you can be terminated from the homeschool. If you're terminated from the homeschool and you're absent from public school, therefore enough, they can issue a truancy. So there is an instance where if those things had been done, there's a possibility. Again, I'm not making an accusation that it was a certainty. There was a possibility because I don't believe county to county it's done in the same manner or with the same consistency. There was a possibility there might have been some court intervention that might at least have had contact with her in between 2023 when the trooper was there and in 2024 when they found her. So that's something that the superintendent is going to work on, whether it's a policy, whether it's something reaching out to the legislature and seeing how we can work together to tighten that up. And I'll let her, detail, how kind of where we've come from to where we are. But that's an area we've seen now that's a spot that was possibly missed that needs fixed. That's not something the governor's office is in charge of. That's a Department of Education, and that's a county board of education, and that's a legislature. But having found it, it's something we want to make them aware of and give them an opportunity to address it. And then finally, Major Mitchell is going to be here to address any follow-up questions you have regarding these GPS or these logs or anything like that. But I hope that I have at least given you a once-over. But now, if everybody's ready, I'm going to open it up for questions. Somebody's got a microphone, so I see Steve here.
Can you hear me? Okay, there we go. Steve Adams, Ogden Newspapers. A question in regards to the referrals. You said that there was never a specific referral for Kennedy Miller, either 2009 and the other cases, but the CPS worker that did go to the Boone County mother in this case, it at least appears there's a situation where you said she was going to clear out the investigative file. So my question would be, if there was no referrals, what file was there to clear out?
That's got to go. Just take it. I'm saying we're watching your okay.
I will speak up. So,
we're close enough.
If there were no official referrals in regards to Kennedy Miller prior, in regards to the CPS investigator that showed up Miller's mother for the interview, what investigative file was there to close out if there were no prior referrals?
That would have been this instance. So even though there were criminal charges filed, there would have been an investigation regarding the death. So they were trying to basically close that case out.
Will that be in your tweet?
Huh?
Will you follow up your tweet with that, please? Because you asked that question on social. And
Yeah.
Thank you. Who was me next?
Thanks, Amy. You're welcome. Got it.
Okay.
So, the troopers saying the sole reason they went to Child Protective Services, the sole reason is because the child had an unreasonable fear of COVID?
Yes. That the way he related to me, and I'll state it as close to verbatim as I can, he just thought that was strange that a 14-year-old would be that fearful of COVID and didn't want to be around people, and quote unquote, didn't want to be around people. I can tell you he indicated when he arrived at the home, this is 23, and nothing to do with current, so I'm going to go ahead and give you probably more than I should, but in 23, and this had nothing to do with the CPS, this was state police. He went into the home, he made personal contact with the child, asked her to stand up, he looked at her, she exhibited no injuries. He had a conversation with her, she was nourished, conversive, but she just indicated that, and I'll tell you, it wasn't in that memorandum or it wasn't in the log. Because my first question is, why did you go there in the first place? And his best recollection is a distant family member who was either a school teacher or a school principal in another county called and just said, I'm worried she doesn't get out much. And so, there was no allegation to the trooper she'd been abused or neglected, but just she doesn't get out, and I'm just worried about her. He didn't make a note of it or document it because it was just a phone call. He grabbed the other sergeant and said, hey, I got to run down here and do it. It's called a well visit. So they just went to do a well visit, and he said, you want to go with me? And they both got in the car and drove down there. While he did the interview of the girl, the other trooper interviewed the grandparents. And basically said the same thing. She doesn't want to be around anybody because she's worried about COVID.
Brian, Kershaw.
Okay. So you said informal contact. What does that even mean? And isn't it fair to say that when they went to the DHHR local office, they went there to report a concern they believed needed looked into, particularly a concern with regards to COVID that maybe involved a mental health concern?
Yes, that's what it is, but that's not abuse or neglect. So that's why I'm calling it informal contact versus a referral, a legal referral where they made allegations of abuse and neglect that would have required DHHR to investigate it. So, I mean, you want to elaborate on the difference between those two and what I'm referring to?
Sure. So the purpose of Child Protective Services is to investigate and provide protection for children if they have experienced abuse and neglect. There are other resources available in this state for children who have mental health issues, and those resources are outside of the Child Protective Services arena.
Now, let me follow that. If you go back and look at the law, he says, I made a referral, gives you the impression he made a quote-unquote referral. That term is generically used, particularly like in law enforcement. Like I went down and talked to the department, it's a referral. But there's a big difference between making an allegation of abuse or neglect that would cause the department to take action. I think Leslie was actually next, and just talking with them and saying, I saw this girl, she exhibited this problem. Maybe you guys want to call somebody and see if they can go talk to her. That's as simple as the officer put it, is that he just wanted them to be aware in case they could maybe get somebody, give her a call and talk to her about coaching.
What could then, when the officer goes and makes the informal contact and says he has this concern, could the CPS representative talk to their, given them any advice or given them to call a hotline, or could they give them any more direction that could have led to somebody following up? Is there something more that the workers could have done at the office to take account of it and say, yes, we're going to check on it, no, we're not, we don't think it rises to the level? Was there not that exchange of information that came forward?
Obviously, there's two sides to that. One, they have no recollection of him being there, so they didn't tell me they told him anything, right? The other is, he says they did not have that kind of exchange where they provided him information and said, you should do this. I think his whole purpose for going there was to prompt them to do some follow-up. Again, not to do an investigation on abuse or neglect, but they might get somebody to call and give a resource. That's normally not something that law enforcement does. Their job's obviously to go out and conduct criminal investigations. So I think that was his purpose of stopping by. That's the best agency he knew to stop by. This is not abuse or neglect, but maybe they know somebody that can call this girl. That was exactly what he said to me. I'll stop by and talk to him. Yeah, they could have said, here's an 800 number, you call it, but that 800 number is for abuse and neglect referrals. This was not one.
Just wondered if there's anything that DHHR has learned from this that they say
I think all the things I've detailed, but I'll let her elaborate.
Sure. So there are several things that I think we all have learned from this, and I will talk to you about the actions that DOHS has taken thus far. The first one is, if anyone should visit a DHHR office in person to make a complaint or referral related to abuse and neglect, we will immediately refer them to the 800 line, the centralized intake line, or we will offer to dial that line for them, place them in a private room, and they can make the report directly from the DHHR office. And so consequently, we won't get into the situation where we have someone who says that they made a report or a referral or whatever we want to call it of abuse and neglect without that actually happening. So that's the first thing. And we sent out a reminder to our entire staff of that as being a firm policy on somewhere around May the 17th. We also realized that there are instances where we get a call into our centralized intake line that do not meet the statutory requirements for the definition of abuse or neglect. If they don't meet that statutory requirement, we have only the option at this point to screen them out. And so you've heard in the news that certain number of allegations or referrals are screened out. We are developing, and we have contracted with a company to help build a differentiated response system. And what that will allow is that, obviously, if the referral meets the criteria set out in law for abuse or neglect, there will be an investigation, as we currently do. If it clearly does not meet the criteria, it will be screened out. But there is this middle area. And I will tell you that most often that's related to poverty, and we do not equate poverty with abuse and neglect. But there is this middle area. And so what we will undertake is the referral of those cases to additional supports. So additional supports in our system, we'll be using our family support centers as kind of the hub for those additional supports. But we've been undertaking this process for probably about a year in developing this differentiated response system. We've met with other states that have the differentiated response system in place already, and they feel that it has been very successful in preventing families from going further down the stream into a true case of abuse and neglect. We have been able to provide those supports and wrap those supports around those children and those families.
So one thing I want to bring up is there's been some sort of a discussion about the family having a medical card. And I know one thing that we talked about with the Board of Education was, you know, if she wasn't doing this check-ins like she was supposed to be doing, and that's something you guys are going to revisit, which is really good to hear. But another thing with that medical card is, was there not any sort of indication that she hadn't been to a doctor in 4 years? Because the criminal complaint outlined that she hadn't been seeing a doctor in, I believe it said 4 full years. I mean, is that something that you guys are going to revisit at all? Just that there was some knowledge of her family being on that card?
The only problem I have answering that question is it's taking for true the things that you've referred to. We have no knowledge of what was relayed to the investigating officers. We're not part of that. So what people did or didn't say, I know what I read in the Charleston Gazette, quite frankly, that the grandparents said something. But we don't know any of that, and we don't want to talk about it here today. If we did, in the criminal case, because we don't. But we don't have any knowledge of the truth or disinformation regarding those allegations that might be in a crime. I just don't know. So to your point, I don't know that I'll let you address it. We have managed care organizations that monitor the payments to doctors. I don't know if there's a flag that's triggered if people don't go to the doctor. I don't know.
Schools oftentimes require routines and kids, to be checked. I didn't know if that was something.
Well, maybe Superintendent Black can put that in perspective, given that this is a homeschool environment and how that impacts this.
Yeah, due to the fact that the Kennedy was homeschooled, that would have taken any of those reporting requirements or required immunizations at various levels, to be reported to the school system. Once the child was pulled to homeschool, as Mr. Abraham said, we're looking at a situation where she was entering 6th grade on virtual instruction and then went to homeschool, and there was not a time that she was required to do anything until the end of that 8th grade year. So there was a lapse there of over 3 years where anyone in the school system had the opportunity to put eyes on her at all or require anything from her.
So do you feel this is, he just didn't have a name of who he talked to, there's no one in the office, he didn't have a name of the person he talked to in the office, there's no one in the office that remembers him? I mean, does that feel incomplete to you?
No, he identified the individuals by name, and these are the two individuals that, I think there was once he may have mistaken a name, but he was able to identify the workers that he talked to. That's the ones, or at least the ones I interviewed. There was some information at one time offered up by those workers back up through their chain of command that he had, a personal, they interacted in court, they interacted out in the field, and so he would have known their names regardless of going there to that day. So that's kind of another issue that drew up a little bit of I go back to my opening statement, we kind of want to wait till we see the whole picture, but you had us chasing out after every little bit and piece of information that they could get their hands on and bring back to us on a daily basis. And we didn't get time to reflect on it. In hindsight, again, I think I'm going to weigh, he identified who they were. I've talked with them. I gave them a chance. Can you state with absolute certainty he wasn't there? He says he was, and they said, no, I can't. We can't do that. We just don't have any recollection of him being there. Again, the so what of it is, for the reason he was there, would have nothing to do with what happened in April of this year.
Anna Sauter, WCHS. Has anyone been fired, or has anyone resigned, or has anyone been punished as a result of this?
Not at this point, because we're concluding this part of the investigation now. I've had some informal conversations with the governor. He's been adamant if, there was wrongdoing by anyone, then we would take whatever administrative action, we were going to take. I can tell you the one individual, the trooper, he's retired from the West Virginia State Police, but I don't assign any fault to him. He didn't call the 800 number, but I certainly don't think that would rise to a level of termination. That would be a refresher in training that please remember to use the 800 number. The workers, I'm not going to identify their identities, but one is at least a 15-year employee, and the other, my recollection of our interview, 8 or 9 years has been investigating cases. They appeared to me to be that day very professional. They were certainly, let me stop and say this about everybody. Absolutely every person I've talked to in this case is 100% sincere. They feel terrible that this happened to this child. I think if they thought there was anything they could do different, they would go back and do it. But by following the law and at least their observations at the time, there's nothing that they would have done different. Now, am I upset with things that have happened since, like the attempted interview? Yeah. That's people thinking they're doing the right thing that should have raised their hand and said, do you think I'm doing the right thing? Because they would have been told no. But those are absences of information and policies that are fixed now by the change of policy. Have to look a little bit deeper. We've got to sit back now and reflect on this and kind of finalize everything and say, did they do the right thing? Did they not do the right thing? As I sit here today, this, again, it appears to be we got all been out of shape over who's lying and who's telling the truth, or, this would have done something different, and what are they hiding? And at the end of the day, I think you were getting what information they could give you. I would have liked to come out the first day and say, here's everything. I know that there's this paper out there threatening to sue us. We've looked through it. It's terrible recitation of law. There are strict confidentiality, both federally and in state law, about these records and about these cases. That reference to must disclose information about death or near death, we're doing that now in an annual report that's been done for years. There's somebody brought up the other day about an attachment missing or something, and we'll look in those things. Every state does it different. Some do them in more real time, but it is nothing more than this child died, here's their age, here's the county, and that's all they do. Every year, West Virginia for decades has just put out a report at the end of the year and has these listed, chronologically, I think. But so that information's out there. In no instance, legally or otherwise, is it ever permissible just to hand out the information and file to the public on a closed case, on an open case, regardless. And the one thing that we have taken away from this is that, you guys have done a lot of Foyas in this. And you want the information. I understand it. You want to get to the bottom of it. You'll be the first to get it. You want to be out on the news with it. But we are really, in this instance, again, these agencies weren't directly involved in this criminal case. But in all of these going forward, we have to understand, and I take this from personal experience, we're not in charge at this level, particularly not in the governor's office, but at the executive branch or at the state. When there's a criminal case, that belongs to the prosecuting attorney, and all decisions in that case must be made by that prosecuting attorney. So what is a criminal investigation or information in a criminal investigation is his decision to make. So in the last little bit, we had we gave out the CAD information and the GPS because an attorney at the Department of Public DPS, they made a determination that there's no exception under Foya. This is releasable. They called me and told me about it after they'd released it. And I thought, well, okay, it's out. But now to think about it, it's unrelated. It's from, a year before, but that's not my decision to make. It's not the decision of an attorney at a state agency. It's the prosecuting attorney should decide whether that information belongs in his criminal investigation. So it's our obligation now going forward to reach out to those prosecutors and find out before we answer your Foya, is this something you're asserting is a part of your investigatory file? And if so, then we'll make the denial basically on their behalf and saying, because it's, again, we can't know that. Maybe they don't want it, maybe they do. But until we ask, we don't know. And so that's a change we're going to make going forward. And that's as recent as the last 24 hours. We've talked about that and how this stuff got out. And understandably, yesterday, the prosecuting attorney in Boone County was upset that, we've been out giving out information. I can understand that, having done that and having had state office holders try to get involved in one of my criminal cases for publicity's sake on a high-profile case I had one time. I was not very appreciative of that. So, and they have a professional responsibility duty under Rule 3.6 not to have pretrial publicity disclosed. So I take very seriously that, and we try to manage here in this office that we're not, we know you want to come and you want to get the information, but that's not our place to do that. Okay.
I'd like to ask Superintendent Black, Major Mitchell, the same question as opposed to Secretary personally. What specific changes in policies and procedures are going to happen within your departments, especially with making sure the check-ins with the homeschool students are done in a timely fashion?
The West Virginia Department of Education is eager to work with the legislature to really see how we can strengthen the guardrails around our homeschool reporting requirements. While we know that we have a great deal of homeschool parents that do things the right way and take care of their kids, and it's the best choice for those families, I think that our 7,000 foster kids in the system is proof that not all parents do what's best for their children. And during the pandemic, our biggest concern was that we did not have eyes on some of these students for over a year. And currently, once a student, even if an assessment had been provided, it's just provided, can be an electronic assessment or submitted to the office. It doesn't mean that we would have seen that child or anything would have been, the outcome would have been any different. So I'd like to, strengthen the requirements so that there is an agency that actually, among all of us, if an assessment's not given, there's some way that we have contact with that family and that we see that child.
I mean, and I understand, Mark, it's honor system. The assessment's honor system, right? So they can turn it in if they choose. It could be, anything. But, so that I want to reiterate, though, and we've talked, the governor supports wholeheartedly school choice and the parents' right to choose homeschool. But, we can see it has potential ramifications if there isn't at least some ability to have contact with children. It's a trade-off. We have to find a sweet spot, and that's how the policymakers have to craft some kind of fix for that, if they want to.
First of all, let me say that from the state police perspective, we for many, many years have enjoyed a good, professional, close working relationship with the Department of Human Services and Child Protective Services. In so doing, we've been very diligent in our academy and a training of all police officers throughout the state of West Virginia to teach about child abuse and neglect. Through this event, what we have wanted to do is, first of all, the superintendent put out a department memorandum recently to all of the membership, instructing them that moving forward, we want to utilize the 1-800, the central report system, in all cases moving forward, regardless of how we feel, if it's something that reaches the threshold of abuse and neglect, or if it's information that we want to share, just to utilize that. So to follow up on that memorandum, we've also talked to the director and assistant director of our state police academy to make sure that in this instruction that is something that is stressed, just to make sure, double sure, that it's stressed moving forward.
Let me follow up on that and reiterate, I don't think that his going there in person was as much a failure, to use the 800 number, as it was a familiarity. Okay? You have to understand, these people work together every day. They show up at crime scenes together. They're in court together. I can tell you from my days as a prosecutor and as a defense attorney, there's just this, we've got to see each other every day for whether it's a multidisciplinary team meeting, and it gets to where there's a comfort level. It's okay to call on a cell phone because that's your friend, or you just walk past the front door because everybody knows you and you're there every day. And so but that's human nature, right? We interact like that all the time. We are informal with the people that we interact with. So that's where we've decided that despite that, we've got to redouble our efforts to document these things, because again, if we had made the 800 call, there would be an absolute record of him being there that day, and we would never been in this he said, she said as to whether or not he went there.
This is kind of a woulda, shoulda, coulda, but we're obviously here because this is kind of spiraled into a kind of back and forth. But 2 months ago, could this not have been solved by just saying that CPS or DOHS was aware of this individual's death, that there had been at least prior CPS contact with her family, not necessarily with her? I mean, based on the plain reading of the law, it seems like that should have been done. Now, I'm aware that you all do that in an annual report, but is there any thought to changing up that procedure and how those types of deaths or fatalities are disclosed in such a way? Because it seems like that could have solved a lot of those 2 months ago.
We as a group have had that discussion, and that is one more of practice than maybe policy. But there is a common sense factor that can never be ignored, and that may be that the information is supposed to be confidential, and we treat it as such. But one of the way this first, if you recall, a couple months ago, kind of came to fruition, to my consternation, and involved the governor, who should never be really, in my opinion, at this level dealing with this, because this was going all the way back down to Boone County, decisions made in Boone County. The governor can't be aware of those kind of things on a daily basis. But one of the things that we've talked about doing is, even though if it's confidential, you can at least, instead of that generic, I think what happened here was a letter went out. It's kind of the standard form letter from DHHR. We can't say anything. We don't say anything. Somebody could have made some outreach to whoever that was. And we do this all the time. I think I do this with many of you. We can't tell you, but there's no there. Or if you go too far on this, you're going to break, the branch is going to break with you. I do that quite often to people in a friendly way, because we can't give out the information, but we also want to thwart the misinformation. I think this got away from us, quite frankly, because of that general denial, and then started this quest for they must be hiding something. I can't make it any more blunt and plain than this. Jim Justice wants us to be 100% transparent. Many days, to my, again, consternation, there's stuff that we just shouldn't say, because I can't give away the state secrets. We don't give away military secrets. This is one of the things that law protects, that the public wants to know, but the public's not supposed to know, because the people on the other end of that have some privacy rights. Many of these cases turn out to be false, right? I mean, you got 60,000 cases a year, 40 of them are looked into. And Jeff told me today, what's the number it's actually found? So 25% of these 40,000 cases are actually substantiated. How many ex-boyfriends or ex-husbands or soon-to-bes call and tell on the other, having come out of that system? I can tell you multiple times a day, which keeps these people busy chasing those around as much as the real ones. So that's the reason there's a confidentiality in there. If any of you out there, somebody called in and tonight, your child has been abused, and they come out and they meet with you, and they find your kid playing in the backyard having just had dinner, and they go back and close that case, do you want your name out in the public the next day because somebody issues a Foya? The answer is no. So there's a reason for that confidentiality, and we honor it. But I can tell you, he wants to be transparent in everything. And where I was going to this in the end is, there's nothing in there with his name on it or my name on it. So I'm never going to, and I know he's never going to, try to cover up something because somebody in Boone County did something right or did something wrong, right? I'm not going to jeopardize, the 28 years I've been practicing law over a mess up and try to hide it because it's not embarrassing to me or him. We didn't do it. So that's why, the allegations of their hiding, that kind of strikes at us because we're the furthest from anybody. Again, I wish I could reel him back in sometimes. He wants to tell everything to all of you all. You know that. You catch him out, he tries to talk to you. But, there are times we can't do that. And this was one of those instances. And it shouldn't immediately be because they're hiding something.
LaShawn Pagan with Mountain State Spotlight. My question is, as more law enforcement officers call the 1-800 number and report cases that are possibly a mental health nature, what is the department going to do in order to ensure that there is a follow-through to check in on these children and possibly adults that are having mental health crisis?
So I'm not sure I heard the full question, as there was some background over here.
She said if officers are now going to use the 800 number, what different is the department going to do regarding children or adults?
So the differentiated response system that I just talked about is the method that we will deal with those that we feel the family needs and some additional support, but does not meet the criteria for abuse or neglect.
Of WSAC, is there any talk of changing homeschool assessments to be required to superintendents every year instead of every 3 years?
That would be a discussion that would have to take place with our legislature. We're required by state code right now when the assessments are reported and how that process works.
The assessment is, I want to make sure I didn't leave something confused. The assessment is mandatory, correct? Yes. So it's what?
Annually, but only required to be reported in grades 3, 5, 8, and 11.
Okay. What I had referred to was optional. It's a may in the law, is that the county superintendent may take some action regarding a truancy if that's not reported, the assessment's not reported, and there's been no contact. At some point, the child, by statute, can be terminated from the homeschooling program because they've not met the requirements by providing the assessments. When you're not in public school and you're not homeschooled or in private school, then you're, in essence, and you're not of the age of majority where you don't have to attend compulsory school, you're truant. So then that can trigger a truancy petition in the courts, and then that involves an opportunity for somebody else to get involved in dealing with it. So that's exploratory, but that's going to be, the department and the legislators and going forward, what tweaks, if any, want to be made to the law. Or, sometimes training there is, hey, it's your discretion, it's may, but our suggestion out to the counties is treat that may as a shall until the law would change, and you can see what happens when you don't. Let this be a learning point to you.
Where the county and any county in the state has actually taken those steps after the assessments were received, and they went as far as to take the family or the child support for truancy issues for a homeschooling family.
That would be like us having to go down into basically a county court system and look in magistrate court and see if...
Been told that it rarely, if ever.
I think we agree that it is not done as a matter of routine. It would be the exception. That's been part of our discussion, that counties are not engaging in these truancy petitions on a frequent basis. So we think that if you want to say, what do we think's a fail in terms of what have we seen, what do we need to fix, I think this is a fail, that we need to see what we can do. Either, again, sometimes laws fix it, sometimes practice fixes it. But there's not a mechanism of enforcement like detrimental, so that then it just becomes discretionary, and people are working really hard, and that's one of the areas maybe they don't put focus on. I can't speak to it. I'm sure there's truancy petitions filed every day in the state, but I can't tell you whether it's a homeschool versus a kid just not coming to school. I don't know.
I understand. I appreciate, number one, the acknowledgement with the 2009 and 2017 cases. And I understand and appreciate the concept that those findings were unfounded and things of that nature. But when you look at the timeline here, as I understand it, in 2009 you have an incident that involves this kid's name being in the file. In 2017, you have an incident that includes this child's name being in the file. 2023, you have an incident where a state trooper is concerned about this child and goes to DOHS. And I'm just wondering, what should the person at DOHS have done with the information from the trooper regarding a mental health concern? You know, we have an entire bureau for behavioral health under DOHS. Should they have been contacted? You know, you may not always get the perfect referral. It may be an informal contact, it may be a formal contact. But don't you have to treat all of those referrals or all of that contact, whether it be informal or formal, as something that could alter someone's life down the way? And do you think this matter was taken seriously enough?
Going back to your premise, which is very long, so I hope I can remember all of it. But those first two instances, okay, let me reiterate, had nothing, the first one, absolutely nothing to do with that girl. She was months old, right? Her name is on that file simply because she was a minor child living in that home. So it's not that it was unfounded against her, right? So I want to make that extremely extreme. You don't walk out here today with nothing else, you understand. There was not an allegation regarding that girl back then that was then unfounded is not true. The second instance, it's the same thing. She was a minor living in the home, and per policy, her name is required to be placed on that file, and that's why you saw when somebody sent you something and said, look here, here's a case number with her name on it, and everybody inferred, well, there was earlier referrals regarding her, and now you're going, oh, but it was unfounded and we were hiding behind it. We're not. Had nothing to do with her. Now, here's where I take a different position, I think, than the department did when they originally told us nothing to do with the girl. The allegation would have been such had it been founded. My opinion would have been it could eventually got to where the girl was brought into it, not because there was any allegation of direct abuse or neglect, but because a parent that lacks the ability to care for a child can be abuse and neglect. In that instance, though, it appears it was an absolute false filing by an ex-spouse, and it was unfounded, but again, no allegation whatsoever. So then to accept that as your premise and say, but then when they came in for the mental health, they should have used those two earlier things to take additional or heightened awareness. I don't know that they even looked at that, but if they had looked at it, it would not have triggered, in my opinion, any heightened awareness or looking at it because it was unrelated, unfounded, and they understood that. They would have looked at that and said, this has nothing to do with the girl. It's not two strikes or there's smoke, there's fire. There was none of that in this. I could see you wanting to get there, but in this instance, that's not it. Now, again, we're talking back to the mental health perspective, and I'm going to refer to the secretary, but I don't know if there's a hop from abuse and neglect, potential allegation, over to somebody needs mental health. Those are two different, I don't even know if they're in the same department anymore, but I'll let her address that.
Well, the Department of Human Services has a number of resources that are related to mental health, and I think they may be up on a slide behind me. We have those resources posted at every DHHR office. They are on our website, and we will work with the state police so that in the future, as part of their training, they know what those additional resources are. But just so that you know, the Help for West Virginia line is considered to be our child mental health crisis line. If a child is experiencing crisis, a family is experiencing crisis with a child, they can call that hotline. They can get help over the phone, but they can also, if they agree, they can also agree to have the mobile Children's Crisis Unit come to wherever they are. And so those things are available. In addition, we have the 988 National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, which is posted in all of our offices, provides free and confidential emotional support to people of all ages who are suicidal or in crisis with emotional distress. We also have 211. We support 211. It is a grantee of ours. Every day, hundreds, if not thousands, of West Virginians turn to 211 for support and information, whether it is financial information, domestic information, health, or disaster-related information. So we welcome all West Virginia residents and families to use any of those resources, and we will work with the state police and we already work with our other partners through the Department of Education and other departments to make sure that those resources are top of mind for anyone who experiences a situation where there is a potential mental health issue.
Point taken that there aren't a lot of resources and things like that, but your staff is aware of all these resources. Did your staff take those resources seriously enough with regards to Kennedy? Should something have been referred to one of those other resources?
The way it's been referred and detailed to me by that trooper, he didn't think she had a mental health condition. He didn't, again, he had a conversation with her. She appeared lucid. She was well fed. She was unharmed. He just thought it was quote unquote odd that she would be scared of COVID at 14 years old. So there wasn't necessarily an allegation of mental health need, but he thought to himself, and it's in that log, and he said it to me, it just seems so odd. I thought I'd stop by, and he says, I think make a referral, but he just said, hey, there's this 14-year-old girl down there. It was just a little strange. She's okay, but it was a little strange that she is afraid of COVID. Could the that's us playing Monday morning quarterback, could those DHHR, DOHS workers said, yeah, we could look in, and we could call and give her, I think that was the reason he went there. I mean, that's what he says. I went down there and wanted to talk to them about it to see if they could make a phone call to her or for her or something. And that, if you want to say that's a miss, I think it could be a miss, that if we're being extra protective and extra, but again, within the four corners of what abuse and neglect is and what they're supposed to do, it wouldn't have fit within that. And to a reasonable person, would it have at that time in their mind triggered I've got to make a mental health referral? Probably not. But all us sitting here today going, wouldn't it have been better if they'd done that? Yeah, I agree. I think that too.
Media and has not asked a question that I didn't call on. You not asked a question yet, and you have one. That follows, sir.
Has there been any discussion to maybe have a teacher or somebody do an in-person homeschool assessment just to check on a child's well-being?
Well, I mean, there's been lots of discussions, and there's lots of things that, in a perfect world, we would like to be able to do. But I think, our counties are bound by state code and what they are allowed to do when it comes to a homeschool student. So as we mentioned before, parent choice is important, and we have a situation with students that are homeschooled that there's only that kind of takes any authority away from the public school system. So yes, we could make a visit following an assessment not being turned in after multiple contacts, if possible. But we are really in a climate right now that, unless we increase some of the guardrails that we have in legislation and then put into policy, it makes it really hard to hold any accountability there.
I just wanted to get some clarity on when Kennedy went into homeschool, because I know you said it was 2019. I think her letter of intent was 2021.
If I misspoke, what was it? She did.
Yeah, 2019, she was actually on virtual, which all of Boone County would have been on virtual at that time because we weren't back from the pandemic. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry. 2020, she was on virtual when they came back from the pandemic, and then the letter of intent was the following.
Yeah, there was an
May.
email from the mother to the superintendent at some point, and that date would speak for itself. So I'm trying to deal with a lot of dates here right now, so if I misspoke, I apologize.
She would have been in 5th grade when we closed schools in March of 2020.
Jeff?
Brian, you called it a miss. Could have been a miss there, by not.
Well,
after the conversation, just a couple minutes ago, you said it would have been a miss. We were being extra careful.
Oh, okay. I was just trying to know what you're referring to.
Right. A miss, but a year later, that didn't, and I want you to repeat that because I think you said it earlier, last week you said it. It's not a death. It didn't cause her death. Something happened from then to that call.
Again, the officer was in that home, okay, in 23. He had personal conversation with her, had her get up so he could look at her to see if she exhibited any sign. And again, he was there on a well check. He was not there because someone made an allegation to him that she'd been abused or neglected. But doing his due diligence, you know, he wanted to talk with her. That's what a well check is. Go in, let me see you, how you doing, and all that. At that time, and I'd have maybe defer to Major Mitchell or even one of the workers, it's normal when you go to a scene, you kind of separate the witnesses. So you could see if their versions match up, you know, so they corroborate one another. So it's my belief that what he referred to me is one of the troopers took the grandparents, you know, out on the porch or outside, and then he talked to the little girl in her bedroom. And, you know, the grandparent says it's COVID. She just doesn't want to go be around people anymore. He looked at her. Nothing was wrong. But her saying, you know, I just don't want to be around people anymore. And I'll ask Superintendent Blatt. At one point, I think she was like a very good student in public schools, or had the information she was.
Yeah, it's my understanding, and some of this is also from reports. I mean, they've talked to teachers. It was on one of the media outlets that she was a good student and made good grades.
So you know, he was not concerned about her well-being to enough that, you know, he was going to go down there and say, you guys need to open up an investigation. He just thought it was odd that she was fearful of COVID to the point where it was, and that was the original call. She doesn't want to go out anymore. For some reason, she's just staying in the house. Can you all go check on her?
And I guess the criminal investigation will show
Yeah.
what happened.
I don't have any information from that day when that officer went there to the home and to DHHR. I think collectively, none of us have any information about anything to do with the criminal investigation. I don't know what happened in the intervening time between 23 and 24. So, you know, like I said, whatever it was, it did happen between 23 and 24, because in 23 she was okay. But as far as what happened, we have no information to provide. And I wouldn't because of the criminal investigation, but we don't have it.
In the past, the department has said that we're investigating around 50 to 60% of these. CPS is responding to about, what am I saying, sorry. CPS has responded to these referrals in about 50 to 60% of the mandated time frame. And it seems like one of the big takeaways from today's press conference is you want people to use the centralized intake system, specifically our mandated reporters. So in this fact sheet that you gave us, it's saying mandated reporters will receive a letter advising them whether the referral was accepted by CPS or screened out. And also within 2 business days, CPS will mail a letter to the mandated reporter informing them of the assessment has been completed. I understand that those assessments will have private information that we do not have about children. Would you be willing to, or is there some type of Foya that we could file that would show us what percentage of centralized intake calls that mandated reporters make are receiving this letter, so that the public can feel confident that as more people are turning to this intake line, that those are being followed up on? Does that make sense?
I don't think that you need to FOIA that information because it's on our child welfare dashboard, that's on our website.
It's saying
The
what
number of calls and the percentage that are screened in or screened out is available on our website. Yes.
Yes, I think is it common for police officers to go to child services when they get a local or informal referral, not on the basis of mental health and not on the basis of drug abuse, but just to essentially go talk to a CPS agent to say that somebody is strange?
Is your question common?
Yes.
Well, let me first of all say that a lot of times when people look at police officers, they, regardless of the department, they see the uniform and they see the job that we do. But you got to understand that behind every uniform is a human being, and oftentimes a father or a mother. And so we care greatly about children. So that would be really leaning upon the individual trooper as to what, or officer, as to what they feel and what they observe. And in this particular case, Sergeant Sutphen at the time had no reservations about leaving that house with that little girl there because he, again, saw no signs of any kind of abuse or malnutrition. He was just concerned about her thinking process at being such a young age. Why is she so concerned about, germs and disease and viruses and things? So he just felt that, to him, maybe overly concerned, but just wanted to share that information to see if there was any other possible resources. So I think really to summarize your answer, it would be based upon the individual officer and what they felt and what they observed at the time.
It's probably not the practice. So to say, obviously we're training all the new officers, call the number, and I'm hoping that our first responders are using that number. It's not to the point of uncommon. And again, I got two versions of this. The department says, hey, we don't think they were there because if they had been, we'd probably remember that. It's rare. On the other hand, when I talk to law enforcement, they go, "No, come on. We interact with them all the time. It's nothing for us to go down there. We talk on cell phones. We see each other out. We see each other in court." So I don't know that I can draw a bright line in that. To his point, that it's just officer dependent. Clear in a perfect world, had he called that 800 number, none of us be sitting here today because he'd be able to reach in his pocket and pull out a letter says you made a call and here's your record that you made the call. And so that's part of this reporting system too. It's not just that we catch everything, but it's also because the mandatory reporter, there's sanctions if they become aware of an incident and don't report it. That's school teachers, medical people. This gives them that layer of protection they need to say, see, I did report this. And so, again, if that had been done, and that was what the governor had referred to, he should have called. He should have. That's the way we set that up for that. But we understand, again, it goes back to familiarity, personality, things like that, where they believe they can, they interact enough. I'll go down there and see the person I know. If they're working, I'll tell them. Again, he wasn't wanting to make a formal referral. He wanted to talk to them about, here's a little girl, might need somebody to talk to her about COVID. I don't want to limit this because we're going to be done today with this issue. It is now truly a criminal case, and we're not going to comment anymore on what's ongoing from here out. I think we've answered, or want to answer every question you have about what happened way back when, but we're not going to make updates to this because this now belongs in the criminal courts, and that's for them to comment or not comment on. And so we're not going to, have you heard anything new? I think I've run this, we've gone as far as we uncovered, he said his, she said this, and, here's who we think the evidence tends to support. None of it has anything to do with why those people are in court in Boone County, and that'll be a day for that to take place, but we're not part of that. So I want to make sure everybody's got a chance to ask everything they want to know today. Yes.
This is a Kennedy specific, so just a more general question. Has anybody gone back and audited the wait times for the centralized checkouts?
Now, so we're clear. For law enforcement and first responders, they have a special prompt. So in other words, they dial the number, they push one. Commissioner Pack tells me that as of just a couple of days ago, the average wait time is 90 seconds.
2021, specifically from my school staff that were calling me as a legislator, that those wait times were over an hour to call and to do the reports. I can tell you as a health care provider, around the same time frame, I also called Adult Protective Services and had the same wait time. So we're expecting individuals to use this number, which is a fine plan. You want everybody to use it, whatever, if they funnel through that system. I think we have to really work on the wait times for particularly those mandated reporters that have other job responsibilities like teachers and healthcare providers.
Okay, he gets report dates. Adult Protective Services is 1 minute and 13 seconds? Okay, for Adult Protective Services, it's 1 minute and 13 seconds. For CPS, the wait time is 43 seconds. For law enforcement, 48 seconds, and a summary is 52 seconds. So it appears since 21 to 24, they've made some tremendous improvements, and I don't know, she can tell why. They've added more people, more resources.
So after somebody is monitoring that, we're not having these individuals wait an excessively lengthy time period to be able to make the report that they need to report. And there is a 24-hour time frame that you have to report as a mandated report.
Right.
Things.
Yeah.
People within the time frame for reporting.
And understand this. the buck stops, in the governor's office, right? But there are things we expect our agencies to do. We give money to highways for equipment. We don't go down and tell them to buy bulldozers versus dump trucks. We count on our agency heads to do the job. I believe everybody in every agency in West Virginia is trying to do a good job for West Virginians. They're sincere. If they're not, we're not going to keep them here. When we find out something's going on wrong, we'll find somebody that can do it and do it right, because that's what we owe the public. I've been around these people now for a long time. We've switched some players at the table, but I think on a daily basis they're trying to do the very best they can. It's a difficult job. It's law enforcement and CPS, but they've got to go out into homes like this home of this little girl and see the things they see. It's not always a fatality, but every day it's something. I've been there. It's bad. And the resources in West Virginia aren't always put to the things they need to. I mean, it doesn't just stop there either. It's the court systems. It's there's many, you are aware there's many, many layers to this. It's not just West Virginia. It's everywhere. I think we rank pretty good in all terms of responses and caseloads and things like that. But there's always room for improvement, and I think they're trying to do that.
Again, I appreciate the information you provided today, especially with regards to prior cases. And I'm just, in the interest of transparency going forward, today you have acknowledged that, hey, there was an incident in 09, you've acknowledged an incident in 17, you've acknowledged what happened to the police there. Going forward, in cases involving a death or near fatality, can we expect your agency, this agency and your administration to be as transparent and at least tell us, like Nevada, that a case may be unsubstantiated, but there was a case?
And I'm going to allow her to give the detail of this. There's been all of us learn something from this every day. As I said early on, I am upset by the way it was originally handled as far as the response out from DHHR. They have legal people down there. We don't direct those legal people what to do. They manage themselves they answer to the secretary. That was basically a form letter that went out that's apparently been there for a long time. As the law says, we don't give you anything, we're not giving you anything. There's ways to do that, and then there's better ways to do that. And that is, here's the law, but, let me assure you of this, or let me tell you that. And, that's the way I think going forward, people should recognize there are sensitive cases, and they need to be dealt with a little bit differently. However, we're looking at, and I'm going to let her do it, different states do it in, again, I said real time. So we're evaluating all those to see, is that better? Now, that's not going to get you to where the media necessarily wants to be. I know sometimes you guys like to get in the car and ride around with them and do the investigation, and so you can report on it. But that's not what we're ever going to get to, a point where we can give you the information, the file, those kind of things. You're going to get a summary, a short summary. So it's either going to be in close proximity to the incident, or it's going to be at the end of the year. I think if we can do it quicker, it's better. I can tell you that as part of this process, we've reached out to the Prosecuting Attorneys Institute, which is an executive branch agency, and asked them to facilitate out to prosecutors. What is it that you would be okay with DHHR giving out? And so far, the general response has been nothing. Again, because they have to protect their case, and they don't want us on the 6 o'clock news telling all we know about the CPS case if that CPS case is an underlying part of a criminal investigation. Having been there, I don't dispute their rationale. And again, if we've taken anything away from this, we're going to defer down to them on what we give out here, because I think we have been missing the ball in some of our agencies where and it's easy to do if you're a lawyer, you get in a box and go, this is my responsibility because I work in this agency and this has come to me and this is what I do every day. And there wasn't enough thought in this to go, wait a second, this belongs to a prosecutor. I better make that contact and ask if they're okay if I release this. And so there was a miss there. And we're fixing that going forward.
One thing to make sure, so this is what you're referring everyone to go to this decision number, not to be an in-person type of referrals like what was done in the past. But how are you going to enforce that too? What it has to do with, fees or not? Or maybe it's a mental health case, for example, like, I don't know, it's a different situation. It could be mental health. How are you going to enforce that? People
Well, keep in mind, the only enforcement is against those that are mandatory reporters. So that's your education, medical, first responders. There's no enforcement. A person on the street isn't required to make a phone call and make an abuse and neglect. So there's no sanction on them. For those people, the first responders, there's administrative, and that is the colonel sitting there has put out a memorandum to every state trooper, this is your way to do this in the future. I would assume the next time there's an instance where somebody fails to use that and chooses another method, they'll provide some kind of administrative sanction against them, whether it be suspension, admonishment, up to a termination, I guess, depending on the gravity of it. But that's the way we would enforce it, and that's the same thing, I assume, at Department of Education. If somebody doesn't do it the right way, there becomes levels of admonishment up to potential termination. But that's the only way we can enforce it. I failed to mention, and I know she had reported, DHHR, I believe, is going to try to create like a placard to give out to all state police and first responders that have these numbers. So when they're at the scene, and they can give it directly to a family member or something, going, here's these help numbers. Because again, it's not, don't confuse law enforcement with mental health people. It's not their job to evaluate them and decide where they need help. They're there to make criminal investigations and check on wellness, and that's all he was there for that day. But that's all I want to say, because I don't want to get into what the family was there about or didn't do. But that's yes. Okay, sorry.
I think at the end of the day, we can all agree that taking care of the state's most vulnerable children is that's what we're all here for. That's why we're here today, is making sure that they're cared for and they don't fall through the cracks. So when you say that now there's going to be this gray area where somebody calls and has something that maybe falls into poverty or mental health issue, which we all know mental health is a huge issue for our kids, what does that process look like? Is there going to be specialized workers who respond to those calls and deal with those calls specifically, or what are the resources? I think what she was saying too is, a child, is not going to call on those resources, and I know there's resources available to families, but it's like the family didn't have to acknowledge that there's even an issue to begin with, and maybe the family doesn't know that the teen is struggling. So for that middle ground, when somebody calls concerned about a child's mental well-being, what happens next?
So, first of all, more to come.
On that, but just to give you an idea, we have set up a structure of family support centers in every county in West Virginia except 2, and we're working on those at this point. They will be the hub for those support and the referral place for that intermediate level of support. They will be able to then, and they already do, but they do it primarily on a voluntary, or that someone has referred them from the community. They already do things like they get them families signed up for any benefits that we may have. They may get a family connected with a food pantry. They may get a family connected with other resources in their community. But the referral system will be, the referral through centralized intake will be, yes, it clearly meets the statutory definition of abuse and or neglect. It clearly does not, or it doesn't meet the criteria, but we do have, there seems to be some issues here that perhaps some of our other programs can help with. And so more to come on the mechanics of that, but for right now, that's what I can tell you, that our family support centers will become the hub for the coordination of those services, because they're located in every community and they know the needs of the community and the resources in that community.
That's actually part of her educational record, and we can't disclose exactly what her attendance was prior to going to homeschool.
The 1-800 number is great for people who want to report if they see a child. What about the child? Does the child still call 911 because they're not going to be able, under stress, to memorize an 800 number?
Yeah, this doesn't take the place of a child in an emergent situation, or anybody. And if you see an emergent situation, you call 911. But no, we wouldn't expect a child, if you don't call that 800 number, you're not going to get the help. But no, yeah, that's your first layer. If you think there's something significant, call 911. The right people will show up with that.
And then that person taking the call will do this or required to do something?
At both our 911 centers and our emergency operations around the state, those people are trained on getting the right person involved, whether it's law enforcement or calling otherwise. I have a high level of confidence they will, and again, there's a recording. If you do that, there's a record of it happening. If they don't act, there's a record of them not acting. So then we don't come to places like this and go, who did what? But I think we have a very strong 911 system in West Virginia. We invest heavily in it, and it's run at the county level with state support. But most people there are hardworking, and I've been around it for a lot of years, and I think they do a good job, and they're aware of where they're supposed to get people to. No, because I think we have evidence that he went there and made a report. So I'm not a prosecutor anymore, so I don't get to arbitrate that to the letter of the law. But because he went in person and made a report, he would have satisfied the reporting requirement. Now, again, that phone number is what we're saying we want you to use if you're a first responder. We're telling them, put out that that's what you want them to use. But reporting is reporting as far as the teeth of that failure to report. This is where we're trying to drive everybody. That statute does not say everybody must call this 800 number or else you failed to meet your obligation so we're trying to educate our first responders, our medical people, and our educators. And apparently they know very well, because I'm hearing education people call and medical people call. So it's well publicized, has been since 2000, the call number 15. And again, the state police have made that part of their mandatory training at the academy for all new cadets for a number of years now. So it just was again, I don't assign it to failure as much as I would familiarity, having now talked to him. Now again, when this is first coming in and we're hearing he did go here and he didn't go there, and we're getting it bits and pieces and we're trying to put it out to you, it makes it confusing. It makes it mysterious. And at the end of the day, once we have time to reflect on it and look at it, it's pretty understandable, I think. Somebody else? Once, twice. I thank you for your attendance. And I appreciate the superintendent, secretary, and Major Mitchell for being here today to help out. Our two legislative ladies that are here today. I know they're actively always trying to figure out what we can do better. And again, if there's anything, we're going to stop today, so that's why I want to give you all the opportunity to get it out of your system. But it's now moving on to a criminal case, and we want to get withdrawn from this. So, all right, thank you.